Well, no one comes into the program that I don't meet with first. And most of them I meet with in person at least once. Quite a few of them I met with them multiple times before they ever actually applied, or they applied and just found out that we enjoyed meeting together so much that we would just meet. And they would tell me what their challenges were. I would ask them a lot of questions. I would make introductions for them. Quite a few of them, they weren't really happy where they were and they wanted to know, what's next. And then we talk about why they weren't happy, and they found out that they're the common denominator on why they're not happy. Because a lot of people forget, when you think you're not happy, you need to look at who's at the center of all that, and that's generally yourself.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Linda Endecott. Linda is the managing director of the Executive MBA program at Helzberg School of Management at Rockhurst University. She has worked in senior executive and development roles for nonprofits, universities, for-profit companies, and has served as a board member and volunteer for numerous philanthropic and civic organizations and initiatives. She is guided by her passion of helping emerging leaders broaden their experiences, skills, and perspectives in service to themselves, their organizations, and their communities. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Linda.
Linda, welcome to the Corporate Couch today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh my God, I had to chase you around for years to get you on the podcast.
Yeah, I got laughing about that when I thought how long it has been in the making. It was actually Andre Davis that after he was on with you, he called me and he goes, just get it done. Just go do it. He said, you do love to talk.
There you go. It's perfect. Yeah, I actually saw Andre yesterday, and I was telling him that you were going to be on, and he said, yeah, she's really nervous. I said, just calm her down. It's all going to be good. Now, the only thing better we could have done, because I think the carrot that I threw in front of you about a year ago is we could have drinks and do it live, but my co-host, producer, editor warned me I better not do that right now without the technology that I need. So there you go. But yeah, we're celebrating 6 years of having met. So I met you your first week at Rockhurst University. So that's nice. It's literally almost to the week, I think. So 6 years. So,
mm-hmm. It was cheers on the 8th.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, let's start with a fun question, Linda. So even though you're out there in the community, a lot of people know you. You're a generous connector and always looking to help people. But what one thing that would surprise people that even know you fairly well about you? What's that for you?
That my first job ever when I was 3 years old was learning how to muck a stable. My grandfather plucked me on a horse, a little pony, when I was 3 years old, and he asked my parents if he could actually give me one. And so it was a little red roan. His name was Mighty Mouse. And my grandfather made sure that I understood that in order to keep that little guy healthy, that it all began with his hooves. And so he handed me a pitchfork and taught me how to muck a stable.
Okay. Now, I went to Catskill Game Farm when I was a child on a trip, elementary school, and I probably saw my first horse there. So mucking a horse, can you explain that for people like myself that know?
Mucking a stable. Well, it was making sure that their feet were always clean where they were. So that meant, a horse, when they're in their stable, they have nowhere else. What it is actually is it just meant that at 3 years old, I was learning how to shovel shit.
So that's interesting, Linda. So I've learned something today, and two things actually: what mucking the stable is, and then at 3 years old, you learned how to shovel shit. So that's fantastic. So
Yeah.
thank you for that insight. So besides horses, what else was fun for you growing up as a child, and where did you grow up?
I'm from Valley Forge, Pennsylvania.
Oh,
And so our life was pretty active. I did a lot of ice skating, and that went on all year long. So that didn't matter. Between the horses, I went away to camp. There were a lot of things that we went off and did. Our family vacations were at a spot called Avalon, New Jersey. So we would drive to Avalon on the shoreline. So I was at the Jersey Shore, only not the Jersey Shore that we're used to seeing on television. It
yeah,
was much
you
quieter.
did GTL, Jim Tan Laundry, Jersey Shore, right?
Yeah, there you go. So I was in Avalon, and that was a lot of fun. My parents had a very interesting group of friends, and all of us children were basically around the same age. And so we all would travel there together. Uh, we got in trouble. I saw my first horror film there. I saw Frankenstein there. My brother was thrilled. He's 6 years older, 6.5 years older than I am. So he loved taking me to go see Frankenstein. Um, Also saw my first R-rated movie there called Irma la Douce. I remember that as well. But
Nice.
just playing in the ocean and being there with friends, we'd stop along the way. If you've not had ever a Jersey tomato, make sure you get one because they are the best. And we used to stop at all the places along the way as we'd get into New Jersey and stop and
Nice.
pick up all our fresh veggies for the house.
Nice, nice. That's so. Any aspirations as a child, like when you were growing up, like I'm gonna be this. Was it an ice skater? Was it equestrian? You seem to love horses.
Equestrian,
Yeah, yeah.
that's always what I wanted to do, always, until I went off to college. And then in college, I was having too much fun in college. So
Too.
my horses weren't quite as important by then.
Yeah. And what kind of fun was that?
College,
Yeah.
oh, it was a lot of fun. Well, that was my first taste of freedom, and I went a year early. So skipped a grade. And so I went when I was 17. And it was interesting being gone for the first time. I went to a very small girls' school, but I could take classes at Washington and Lee, which was bigger than where I was, but not by a whole bunch. But I was in the town of Lexington, Virginia, and that's a seat of great history around there. And that's where I met also my first husband,
Oh
Skip
well.
Knotberg.
Oh,
Yeah, I met
nice.
the only person on the entire campus from the state of Kansas.
Might have been the
That's
only
what
one
my
in Penn.
parents did when I that's what my parents did when I told them
Oh,
that I wanted to bring somebody home, and it wasn't a girlfriend, it was a boyfriend.
yeah. Yeah, they probably thought he was a farmer or a cowboy or an Indian from
Mhm,
Kansas, probably.
mhm.
Yeah.
He was not.
Yeah. Well, interesting. So Valley Forge. So any George Washington stories? I mean, the famous Revolutionary War, the winter in Valley Forge. Any? Did you become a
Yeah,
historian?
I lived not far from the park. I went through classes and learned how to be a docent so I could do tours through the park. And believe me, every summer there was a Boy Scout jamboree. So there were about 5,000 Boy Scouts all over the park. And let me tell you, it was fun being a docent during those days. That was a good time. But I did learn a lot about American history. My parents spent a lot of time making sure that we were in Philadelphia a lot. I'm old enough that I actually got to feel the Liberty Bell and the crack in the
Wow,
Liberty Bell.
that's cool.
So that was fun.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
got to do a lot of that. It was soon after President Eisenhower came out of office. His family were my neighbors, so I got to know them really well as well.
Yeah, didn't you date David Eisenhower, the
We tried
grandson?
it, but it was more like dating my brother than an actual date. And then he actually got to know Julie a whole lot better. We were pen pals for a while. They were a terrific family to
Yeah,
know growing up.
yeah. And when you say Julie, you mean the daughter of
Nixon,
Richard M. Nixon's daughter,
uh-huh,
who he eventually
correct,
married, right?
correct.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct. And they have beautiful children. I think he is still at the University of Pennsylvania. I think he still comes in occasionally. I don't think he's full time there anymore. I haven't seen him for a while. When he wrote his last book, he came in for rainy day books, and that's pretty much the last time I saw him.
A little bit more about college. So you went to, I believe, Radford University, right?
Uh-huh. I
Yeah.
did.
And what was your major, and was that your initial major freshman year that you ended with, or and what was the reason to pick the
Yeah,
major or
I
majors?
was not too imaginative. It was you at that time, it was you usually went to be a teacher. So I ended up being a kindergarten teacher. I will tell you, I did have a choice where I could teach at the local school or I could be bused. I rode a bus and go into the hills of West Virginia. It was 45-minute drive, but I taught kindergarten in the hills of West Virginia. And I'll tell you, that was quite an experience for me. I enjoyed that a lot. I
Yeah.
really did. When we went back for our 10-year reunion, I let some of the people I had worked with know that I was coming. And I, to this day, and I'll show it to you sometime when we're together, they had made a jacket for me and it was for Wild Nightmares. And I'll tell you about it when you get to see it. It's
Oh,
very, very cool.
very cool. Why teacher? What was the appeal for you to become a teacher?
I love children. I liked the classroom, and I just didn't really know what else I wanted to be. My father was president of a steel company. He was gone a lot during those days. He spent a lot of time in the Dominican Republic in the steel mines there. They were doing a lot of work in Cuba as well because there were ore mines that were there. And so Daddy traveled quite a bit. And back in those times, you have to remember there was a lot of unrest. And when Cuba closed, making sure Daddy got out of there and got home was kind of an interesting time in our family.
Wow, sure.
Communication was not as good as it is now. His most fun story was when he was going down to South America. He would go on the overnight flights, so he'd be ready for daytime meetings, and he popped onto the plane and was all settled in and woke up the next morning and realized they had never taken off because they were snowed in New York. So he never even got out.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. So was it a family company, or he just was a president of a
No,
company? Yeah.
it was the oldest steel company in the United States at that time. It actually made the first cannon that was ever shot in Valley Forge Park.
Oh, wow.
It's in a box in the little town of Phoenixville, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow. Incredible.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he took that over. It was traded on the American Stock Exchange. And then when Daddy retired out, they actually sold it to a French company called Cressat Loire. And that
Oh.
was in the 70s when he retired.
So this program, was it similar to like I think Teach Across America, where they kind of put you into kind of more underdeveloped areas, put teachers in there to kind of,
No, I didn't have that at my small school.
yeah.
did not.
Yeah.
And so it was actually the two choices where we had to teach were, where they were.
Right.
So
Yeah. So so then how did you get to Kansas City? I mean, obviously your boyfriend in college was from the area, it sounds like. So
yes, he was. He went to my parents and asked them if we could get married. That was toward the end of our junior year.
oh, wow.
And they said yes. And then he asked me. It was pretty funny. We'll do that backwards, but I'll get there. The day that he asked me, we were having a very casual lunch. And in the middle of me taking a bite of my sandwich, he thought that was the appropriate time to actually say the words, I love you. Will you marry me? But it was not on bended knee. We were both sitting.
Okay.
And so
And you still
I
said
never got
yes.
the bended. Yes, I did. I said yes. And we came out here to Kansas City for an engagement party out here. It's actually where I met one of my closest friends, David Oliver. He was at that party. He
Okay.
was in class with my soon to be brother in law, and his parents were invited. It was a good sized party. And David had just been accepted at Haverford, which is back in Pennsylvania and basically pretty close to my backyard. So that was our common denominator there. And I am thrilled to say that David and I are still close friends. And so I get to see him almost every day.
Oh, that's really
So
nice.
that's a
And,
lot of fun. We'll
and
meet
for
at Exwa in the morning.
I heard that is your place. That is your meeting
Yes,
place. Yeah, there we go.
it is.
You must reserve that for just special people because we have not met there, you and I. But
Well,
maybe,
I think I asked you to meet me there, and you
yeah.
said it was easier for me to come to you. So that's how we
Oh,
met at
okay.
Pilgrim.
Okay. Okay. I'll take your word for that one. So yeah, just and for people that don't know David Oliver, I just know of him. I've actually never met him, but I know a lot of my friends, as well as you, know him very well. But distinguished lawyer, not for profits, and a Kansas City icon. So
Correct.
yeah.
Correct. He's a
Uh,
wonderful human being. He's also one of our adjunct professors for
okay.
the Executive MBA program.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and we're always going to talk about that. But putting aside, Linda, what you're currently doing, because we can go so many different directions on your career. What particular job or period of your life that did you enjoy the most? Again, not taking outside what you've been doing the last 5, 10 years.
I've never had something that I really didn't like. I always love a good challenge, and there's been challenges in my life. Not everything was a piece of cake. I really loved my job at Consumer Credit Counseling Service. That was a really interesting time because we expanded and we actually had one of the very first 24-hour, 7-day a week call centers for those people that wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning wondering how they're going to ever pay their bills.
Wow.
And so consumer credit was a lot of fun. And I had a female president. Her name was Nancy Nauser.
Wow.
I haven't talked to Nancy in a long time. She came to them through UNB Bank. And working with her and the teams that she had assembled, it was really a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. It was a lot of hard work. Um, it, but I liked what we got to do. I ended up as senior vice president over development. And so I did a lot of the grant writing. I went out and met a lot of people in the community. So we just kind of grew from there. So our operations, we had 19 offices. And so I wouldn't go to all of them. Mine was mostly Kansas City to our other big office, which was in Columbia. So I would go there quite a bit.
How did you navigate into consumer credit counseling in a career there?
Actually, through my attorney. He sat on the board and he said, "Hey, they're looking for someone that knows how to go out into a community and talk to CEOs. And the only person I know is you. So I think that's what you should go do. So I went and I met with Nancy, and I liked her so much. And we talked about what the job would entail. And as usual, she told me what her thoughts were. I told her what my thoughts were and what I wanted and what I thought would be really good for the company. And that's where we started. And that was back in the 80s.
Yeah, I mean, to have a 24/7, 365 call center, that was definitely leading edge.
Yeah, it really was. And we actually worked with people over at the University of Missouri, and they had a class called Family and I can't remember what the full course was, but they got full college credits for what they learned and did with us.
Wow.
And they did a superb job. Superb.
Talk about some of the things. I mean, we have to go in through the whole background, but you're part of a family that is one of kind of the iconic, privately held companies, family-run companies in Kansas City. Like, what was that like? Coming from your background in Valley Forge and college, and coming to a little different type of environment here in Kansas City.
Well, it was totally different than what I was used to. And really, and like I said, when I left for college, I was 17 and I was basically gone by then. I learned a lot from my father, being president of a steel company, because he wasn't home very much. The only times I could really get to see him were at dinner. And so occasionally when he had people come in from out of town, I would end up being at the dinner table. And I learned a lot of business back then. My dad was one that taught me what it was to have respect for everyone within a company. I always laughed and said, you were ahead of your time, because he basically told people, this is how you will treat everyone while you're here at this company. You will act like you're talking to me, no matter who it is you're talking to. And if I ever hear that you've been disrespectful, you'll have to come meet with me. And they would go and meet with him, and he'd say, one more chance and then you're out. And he told them very bluntly, if you do anything that you should not be doing, or you're rude to someone, I'll send you back to the mail room and collect the box from the person you were rude to there to clean out your office and get out of here. I mean, he was pretty blunt on that. He also only had male assistants. He never had female assistants. His were all male.
Yeah, what was his thought process behind that?
He traveled so much and did so many other things that he never wanted my mother to feel threatened on that. It was an interesting way to think back then.
Yeah,
100%.
I
mean, Daddy was very much that person. I remember we were back visiting, and my daughter Jamie was maybe 6 or 8. And she said, hey, Pop, as you walk by the refrigerator, can you grab my yogurt out of there? And I was sitting there and I started laughing as she was asking the question, because I knew what was coming. Daddy threw his hand up and said, I don't do refrigerators. And he kept on going.
I love it. Yeah. So during that time period, so you go into teaching, where, because was it going into getting a business degree even an option for you, or because of the time period?
Not really. I mean, I could take business courses, but it really was not an option for me at that time and see, my school was all girls. And even at Washington and Lee, it was not actually called business classes, but I could go in and out of some of the classes there. I went, sometimes it would be one of Skip's classes. I would go sit in on that, but it really wasn't known as business courses back then.
Right. And obviously that was the norm, kind of, but did you ever think it was kind of strange that that option wasn't really open to you, or it was a hard
No,
door to
not
open?
that. I look back on it and wonder what I, and it wasn't that I wasn't curious. It was just I didn't think about it that
Right.
much.
Right.
I knew what I was doing. I knew where I was going. We were getting married. I was planning for the wedding, although it was actually my parents, my mother's wedding was everything that they never got to have.
Right.
And so, moving here was just something that was different. It didn't really hit me till we were driving from Pennsylvania home to Kansas City. That probably was going to be the last time I would make that a drive.
Right.
And because we used to, if I was back in Kansas City with him, we would drive back to Pennsylvania. And my parents were the parents that said there will be no stopping along the way. We realize it's an 18-hour trip, but there's two of you in the car. You will drive straight
Oh, gee.
through.
Oh God. When I moved to Kansas City in the 80s, my roommate and I, we drove to New York 24 hours straight.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And if there was construction along the way, it made it that much harder. I can
Yes.
remember we were coming into DC and I knew the roads around there pretty well, and I got caught in a construction trap. And we ended up somewhere lost between DC and Maryland. It was
There you go.
amazing how I don't know how to read a map. My husband today would say she can get to where she wants to go to, but he said it's on a wing and a prayer.
There you go. Yeah, thank God for Google Maps or Waze or
Oh,
whatever. But
so totally.
yeah, yeah. I actually had a conversation with Scott Havens today. We are talking about MapQuest when you actually printed the directions and took it with you on a trip, on a
And
business
even
trip.
then, I had a hard time. So when I'm driving and someone's telling me what to do, I'm good with that.
Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah. So it looks like you're doing you had this consulting firm for the last like 15 years. It still looked active, at least on your LinkedIn. You want to tell the listeners a little about what you do there?
Well, that's my good friend Cynthia Enright. I met her through a friend of ours by the name of Knittin' Pie. And Cynthia and I, when we met, as Knittin laughed and said that he could have dropped dead sitting at the table 3 minutes after Cynthia and I left, and we just would have shoved him off to the side. But Cynthia had been working at Sprint and had left Sprint and was starting her own company. And that's why Knittin introduced us. And so when I asked her the name of the company, she goes, well, let me tell you about this, because she said it's a name we kind of have to explain. And the first time I heard the name Evolution, it was just kind of like, huh, I have no idea what that means. And then the more we started talking about what the company was for, it was for companies that were looking for value creating change. And it became apparent that a lot of companies don't really embrace and understand their own intrinsic value. And so what we did was we took the words from intrinsic value and evolution, because business is an evolution. Almost every single solitary day, your day should be different tomorrow than it was today. I don't care how small a change it is, but it should be different. So we just smushed those two words together and came out with Evolution. And
Okay.
it's a small I with a capital V, Alution, because value is at the base of all of that. And Cynthia is the really, really smart one. And I was the smart one on the people side.
All right.
And so I always went to a meeting about 10 minutes ahead of Cynthia so I could get everybody, it's kind of like the warm-up comedian. You come in and you do the warm-up, and then the main show walks in the door and says, let's get down to business.
All
And
right.
that's pretty much how Cynthia and I did our business. And then it became, we took a job at one of the other universities here in town. And then a friend of mine was going through the program at Wash U and came back to me and said, hey, they want to open up a campus here in Kansas City, and they're looking for someone older who knows a bunch of people in town. I told them about you, and I said, well, I didn't know I was looking for a new job. And he said, well, at least talk to them about it. And I did, and I found this kind of solved everything that I loved doing, and it's all based on people. People, people, people. I love people. I love
Right.
learning from them, all ages.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. If you're having challenges taking your business to the next level, if you want to augment your leadership team, or prepare your company for increased growth, profitability, and an eventual successful exit, we have seasoned executives from every C-suite position ensuring a perfect fit for your needs and the dynamics of your industry. You will work with senior leaders who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. They can help your business in specific services such as strategic planning, executive leadership coaching, financial management, corporate governance, marketing, sales management, and many other advisory solutions vital to your business success. That's exechq.com. To learn more, go to exechq.com or email Jeff Palacio at jeff.palacio@exechq.com.
Obviously your dad was a big influence on you in many ways. But, from a leadership perspective, treat everybody, whether they're the security guard, when you open get into a building, to the CEO, treat everybody the same. You learn from everybody. Everybody has a lesson for you and as a teacher. But what were some of your other influences from a leadership and people skills perspective, Linda?
Well, I think when I got here to Kansas City, my father-in-law was the third generation owner of U.S. Engineering. And so I got to learn a lot about the construction industry at that time. And Skip was coming in to the company. He didn't know that he had ever wanted to work there. He thought maybe he wanted to go to law school, but we had gotten married. So as he said, good Lord, I've got a wife and we have to earn a living. So that's really why he started at U.S. Engineering. And then I started working as well, because I was the kindergarten teacher at what that time was called Sunset Hill. But kindergarten was only half a day. So I'd say my headmistress there, she was great in welcoming me, because I had just turned, I'm 21 years old and I'm coming in now and I'm going to be teaching. But it's also where I got to meet so many of the people that I ended up calling friends. So that was important when you take a look at where I am today in the world. I met a lot of people at that time. It was just being at really great places and having an opportunity to get to know a lot of really wonderful people. And it's so much fun for me when I still run into some of my former kindergartners, and they'll stop and they'll still call me Mrs. Notberg, and it just cracks me up.
That's funny.
And when I tell them, please, I think that ship sailed, I've remarried and I'm Linda Endecott, and, just call me Linda. And they still call me Mrs. Notberg. They said, once it's ingrained in your head, it's hard to get that out of there.
Yeah, being a great teacher is definitely a joy and a gift to people, because you never forget great teachers.
No, it was a good time. I learned a lot from Mary Catherine C. was the kindergarten teacher there, and she had been at Sunset for a very long time. They actually, we named the playground after her, the Mary Catherine C. playground, for the kindergartners, preschool, everyone there at Sunset.
Was being a kindergarten teacher the hardest job you ever had in your life?
Well, sure. Think about a room full of kindergartners. I mean, they're coming in, they're like wild, and they're all girls. because at that time, Sunset was the all girls school. And so, yes, that was hard. And I just like today, I love to start meetings at 7 o'clock in the morning. I still do a lot of those. I was at school at 7 o'clock to meet those. Usually the dads would drop the little girls off on their way to work. So I'd be there and I'd get to see all the dads and drop off all the little girls. And then the moms would be the one to pick them up at 11:30 because our kindergarten at that time was only half day. So I got to meet a lot of people then, but the most fun was Jolie Herman was in kindergarten class, and her big brother Brooks was born in October of that year of 1975. And I knew at that time I was pregnant with our first one. And I held Brooks and I said, well, I don't know who's in here, but maybe you two will end up being friends. And the boys to this day still call it Mom's in Utero story. And
That's
I had
funny.
to tell the story at both of their weddings on how they met. And they've been best friends pretty much since day one.
So when did you kind of pivot out of being a teacher, and what was the next move for you? You made it.
I did a lot of volunteer work, so that's how I got involved in the community. My mentors for my community work, I'm a very, very lucky woman, and I know it. I knew it back then, but not to the extent of what I know now. That old saying of, I wish I knew then what I know now. My mentors were Adele Hall, Marion Kramer. I don't know how many people remember Marion Kramer. She and her husband both sadly died of cancer within just months of each other. And Betty Henson. They were the ones that pretty much introduced me around and made sure. And I did a lot of volunteer work back in Philadelphia because my mother was very involved in the whole area. They taught me that your word is your bond. And even though you're a volunteer, when you say you're going to do something, make sure you show up and actually do it. And so that was pretty important to me back then. I enjoyed that quite a bit. My first real place was March of Dimes.
Just for points of reference, so you mentioned influencers that were friends of yours and helped you, kind of evolve. I think it was the Hall family who was part of the Hallmark, started
Yes.
Hallmark. I think Betty Henson might have been Paul Henson, the United Telecom well-admired
That made
CEO,
Sprint.
became
Yep.
Sprint. Yep. I know that because I worked at Sprint, so I didn't. I knew that story. And then the Kramer, I'm not sure who they were.
John Kramer.
Yeah.
John Kramer was an attorney here in
Okay.
Kansas City, and those three women, I think, really made such a great difference in a lot of the community landscaping. And at that time, also marrying into the Notberg family, it also introduced me to my father-in-law's sister, Corky Notberg Pfeiffer, Bill Pfeiffer, and that was Pfeiffer Printing.
Okay.
So Corky Pfeiffer was also someone who had a lot to do with how I could navigate through the community in volunteer work.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. So tell us what I know you were at Washington University, started that, but now for the last 6 years, you've been the managing director of the Executive MBA program and at Rockhurst University's Helzberg School of Management. So talk about what you've been able to accomplish there and how you help people and really groom the future leaders of Kansas City and beyond.
It's really understanding that when I meet with people, no one comes into the program that I don't meet with first. And most of them I meet with in person at least once. Quite a few of them I met with them multiple times before they ever actually applied, or they applied and just found out that we enjoyed meeting together so much that we would just meet at XWA. And they would tell me what their challenges were at work. I would ask them a lot of questions. I would make introductions for them quite a few of them, they weren't really happy where they were, and they wanted to know, what's next. And then we talk about why they weren't happy, and they found out that they're the common denominator on why they're not happy. Because a lot of people forget, when you think you're not happy, you need to look at who's at the center of all that, and that's generally yourself. And so in learning about what do you ask yourself, it is kind of, how do you mentor yourself to figure out, is it all about you, or is it all about the people that you've surrounded yourself with? And so in an executive MBA program, those are the questions people come with. Is it me, or is it the people I'm surrounded by? And by the way, I don't really have a group of people that I can ask these questions. Or I am the CEO. What happened to my culture? How is that going sideways? And so I get to learn a lot from them, and hopefully they also seem to learn something from me. But it's the magic that happens when you pull a class together, and they come from all backgrounds. The median age is mid-40s in the classroom, so we do have some benchmarks that they have to hit. And I get to meet them just about anywhere where you can go. I mean, we were at a gathering during the summer, and Phil looked at me and he said, you would just love to walk around and just hand your card out to almost every person that's in this room. And it was interesting, when I came to Rockhurst, they were telling me that they've had all male classes with no women. And then they said very few women ever come, to class. And then they were laughingly saying, and we can't get everybody to show up for class. And I said, well, when you give them a 21-month calendar, and they said, no, we give them a calendar every semester. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. And I said, how many executives do you know that can show up on, something that they haven't actually planned for? Because I said, I'm not a key executive at this point, but I know where I have to be for certain speaking engagements, or I'm having coffee with people. So the person that I have the most fun with at Rockhurst is a woman by the name of Grace Irwin. Grace really is amazing, Grace. And so Grace and I sat down and put together a 21-month calendar for our first marketing materials. And at Rockhurst, they also asked me to change how they did all their classes. So when I was at Wash U, we had changed it from every other weekend to an all-day class weekend once a month. So at Rockhurst, our classes are an all-day Friday and an all-day Saturday, with breakfast being served at 7:30, and class begins promptly at 8 to 5, both Friday and Saturday once a month. A lot of work in between, but that's when they have to be in the classroom in person.
And it's a cohort program. Everybody takes the same classes at the same time. The peer.
Correct.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and they come from all different backgrounds. It's like in the new class that just started in August, I have someone that works at Exxon, which is thousands of people, down to the solopreneur, and she works with other people, but her company is just her.
Right. Interesting.
So we have them all shapes and sizes of companies, and all are welcome here. When we say that's why we're at Rockhurst, it's why we're at Rockhurst. It is the most magical thing I have ever seen, when you bring people that have never met before together in a classroom. And we set the groundwork of talking with them about what their first assignment is, on how they introduce themselves, to begin building that foundation of trust. And you watch it blossom from there, and it just leaves me speechless every single time a new class begins. It's the most exciting day ever. It's like the first day of kindergarten.
There you go. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
And
I tell them all that they're just a room full of kindergartners in adult clothing, because we all still talk about the same things. We're all tired, and we want to know when snack is and what it is.
Yeah. So speaking of being tired, I heard you have a walking, routine every day, 5 a.m. So, and I also heard that you have more energy than most 25-year-olds. So what is your secret of, kind of maintaining that youthful energy?
I love the really good kind of surprises. I just think every day it's just a new chance for whatever you want to make it to be. Not all days are happy days when I wake up, but my husband will tell you without caffeine, because I do drink only decaf, people die laughing when they hear that. And they're going, we thought this was caffeine infused. And I said, no, I can wake up singing, I can wake up dancing, I can wake up whatever. And we're just ready to go. And I do think it's all because each and every day is something new. It's exciting, that old phrase of, every day you should learn something new. You
Yeah,
really should. I mean,
right.
it's exciting. And when you leave your ears open to hear what someone else is experiencing, it's just magic.
Linda, you and I are both in the baby boomer generation. So, talk about what's your perspective. I've heard a lot of people talk about that they're facing kind of ageism in the workplace. So if they get laid off based on a buyout, or a company goes out of business, or just it's a big reduction in force, they're out there and they're having a hard time securing jobs. I would just love your opinion on that, and any advice you would have for them.
Well, I think the older you get, the more wise you can become, but not everybody is that way. I know what birthday I'm facing in the next, I should have it down. I meant to have it down for how many days that will be, but it's right after Christmas is my birthday. So I know how old I will be. And I was talking with someone that is in their later 60s, and they said, I don't know how you keep up doing this. I don't know how you find the energy for this. And again, it's down to your age is just a number, and you're only as old as you allow yourself to be. And as long as you keep moving, it was interesting yesterday. We're all supposed to go to the doctor at least once a year. And so I did all my blood work, and yesterday were all of my results on everything. And my doctor is one, she spends little over 2.5 hours with me to go through what all my test results are and everything that's going on. But we talk so much more about the blue zones and how people in a blue zone, how they just keep moving, and how you never let your brain just kind of hang out there. You've got to be around people. She got laughing when she said, so talk to me. Do you consider yourself social, or are you starting to cut back? And I said, well, you could call my husband and ask him what he will say about the social part. But it is, and I do think about it, am I too old to be out here doing it? What I get to do. And I guess I'll know when that day comes, or one of these days someone will just tell me. But I I work with people. I have a gentleman in Chicago, but his home is in Phoenix, which is where my daughter lives, and that's how I met him. And I'm counseling him. He's getting ready to retire, and he's 63, and he'll be retiring. He gave his company 5 years notice. He's the CEO. And so there's a lot of work behind what he does. So we've been talking about what's his next big thing, because he said, I want to retire from this company, but I have no intention on retiring. So I give people homework to do and things to think about, because I said, I can't tell you what your next big thing is, but I can help you use your own brain to get there, to figure out what that's going to look like. And I think that's where, as long as people still keep a curious mind and they're really interested in finding out what they're still interested in doing, I think that will help them along the way. But ageism, you're not at the right spot. I mean, I'm also working with a person who is a commander on the police force in a major city. And he said, I'm just ready to move on. And he said, I have targeted May. So we started over the summer what his next plans are going to look like. And in talking with him last week, it became very apparent where he wants to go and what he wants to do. Now, I can't help him with too many connections in that city, but I know some other people that live there. And so I've connected him with them, who are the ones connecting him with where he wants to go next. So I think there's a next for everyone, and sometimes it could be the most exciting thing you fall into. And then there are a lot of people that just like what they go do, which is not a whole lot of anything, but they get together with their friends. And I think it's as long as you don't lose those connections with other people, those are the things that will help keep you young.
Yeah, I have no plans on retiring anytime soon. I don't really even like the word. I think it was more used in the generation where you worked somewhere for 40 years and, then you retired, had a pension, all that good stuff. But I think it keeps you young in terms of being able to add value and use your mind, be curious, like you said. Rupert Murdoch retired at 92, I guess, and it wasn't because he needed the money. He's worth $8 billion, but he obviously wanted to, provide value, and there's nothing wrong with people that want to retire and go to a beach and all that good stuff. It's just, Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V of Vaynerchuk Media, same thing. He's, has no plans on retiring anytime soon. What do you want to achieve in the next 5-10 years? What would be a goal for you, Linda? Do you have one?
Oh, I have a whole lot of goals out there. I kind of also just like I said, I'll know when it's time for me to retire from Rockhurst, but not now. We have I can't believe I'm going to use the word a new president, but she's been there now 2.5 years, so
Right.
she's not exactly new. But I like each and every day, I think there's something new that she's looking at and doing differently. And my dean, Dean Gartland, is amazing what we're doing in our school. We've just renamed it. We're the College of Business and Technology. Where are we going? What are we doing? The people that are coming in as professors have retired out. We have one who just will have my heart forever, but she's pretty much retired from us on campus. So there's someone new that came in, and she's been through the Executive MBA course, and she's a PhD, brilliant person as well, and watching the new and exciting things that they do in the classroom. So I think what it comes down to, what do I want to do? I want to help people find the best part of themselves, and to make sure they don't forget that no matter what you are doing, no matter where you are, you have value, you matter, you count, you have impact, and it's all in how you impact other people. And I listen to my children on what they do. Tyler at US Engineering, and Jamie, my daughter, is a therapist out in Phoenix, and discovering what's exciting to her. She told us just a month ago that she loves all of her talk therapy, but she's now going into equine therapy. And she said, why didn't I do more with your horses when I had that opportunity? And I said, you were busy doing other things. I said, things show up when they show up, and it's in your time, not anyone else's timing.
The teacher appears when the student is ready, a Chinese proverb, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Linda, I would love your leadership wisdom. I try to help two groups of people with the podcast. One is that recent college graduate as they're navigating that first job search and getting that first job and then starting their professional career. What words of wisdom would you want to impart on them?
I think it would be go at it with your whole heart, even if it's not the job that you were actually hoping to get, but it's the job that you got. Get the most out of the experiences while you're there. And if you have a whole bunch of failures, and if I don't know if you do follow me on LinkedIn, but I just did a whole LinkedIn blog on failure. It's kind of the big thing. We tend to remember, what did I fail at? How did I find my way back from that? So I was meeting with someone earlier this morning who said, I made this big boo-boo and now I'm out of a job. And so I need to look for a new job. And I said, well, let's start with, what'd you learn? What are you bringing with you? Let's make sure that we unpack that suitcase of failure before you go somewhere else, dragging it with you and thinking that everything you do from here on out is going to have failure with it. So I was helping someone at early hours this morning unpack their suitcase that they thought was full of failure. And by the time we were finished talking it through and I gave her some other homework to do, it ended up being that we've identified some other things now that she wants to go do. And I don't think the failure will be a failure that she'll live with. It will be a, hey, I really learned a lot from that.
Sure.
So I think that's part of it. And also in the Executive MBA, we talk about transferable skill sets. And just because you start in one thing, it doesn't mean you're going to end up there. I mean, yes, I'm back in academics, but I'm back in academics differently. And I had a bunch of nonprofit, for-profit, corporate. I mean, I just had everything else along the way. You just have to leave yourself open to where are the opportunities and what sounds challenging and really good for you. Talk to your friends that you trust. Continuing education, go for it. I mean, truly, it's great to invest in yourself and give yourself an opportunity to learn different perspectives, to leave yourself open. I mean, it's just give yourself the opportunity to bring value and impact all along the way, and you make such a huge difference. So those are my words of wisdom, if you want to call them
Yeah.
that, from a really old lady. It's just leave yourself wide open
Yeah.
to what's next out there, and leave a little bit of wonderment in there. There's something to that, to be able to say, when you ask me where my energy comes from, I walk the same roads almost every morning with my dogs, and yet I find something new every single solitary day. And it's just exciting to think about life that way. It's full of something. You just have to look for it.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you. The other group that I love to help is, while everybody is a leader, can be a leader, those that want to take the career path of actually having people under them in an org chart that they're responsible for, whatever functional area that is. What advice would you have for them as they take that managerial step on the org chart to be and start to lead a group of people?
That's a great question. I like that. And it's a lot deeper than I would have looked at it many years ago. My parents, when my brother and I were little, and again, he's 6.5 years older than I am, is my parents always said, just your number one role in life is to be of service to others. That's why we're born. So it was always that servant leadership heart. Although my mother was more that person, Daddy would just say I was a cold-hearted president of a steel company. So, call me whatever. But it was always when you can look yourself in your own eyes in the morning when you're brushing your teeth, and at the end of your day, when you can still look yourself straight in your own eyes and know that you had a good day. Those are the ways that you measure yourself. As long as you can always look yourself in the eye and know that you gave it your best. So I have a little sticky note, and I laugh because I think it might have been when almost sticky notes were invented, but it's on a sticky note and it says, "Dear Linda, today there isn't anything you and I can't do together. And I love you." And I sign mine God, because that's where my belief system is.
Sure.
But there are a lot of other people that I say this to, and they put on what they believe in. And so I read it every single solitary day. I will scream it from the rooftops. But I think it is looking at yourself, how do I lead myself before I become a leader of others? And so I think it truly is that self-reflection of who am I?
Yeah. No, I love that. Linda, thank you so much. You're such a gift to the Kansas City community. I'm so honored that you sat on the corporate couch with me, and I really thank you.
I thank you. This has been more fun than I thought it was going to be. I kind of forgot we were even recording anything because I'm just talking with you. And so this is just a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, that's how it's supposed to be, so it's all good. We could have done it lying down and really got into the corporate couch feel, but thank you again. I'm just honored to know you and call you a friend.
Well, it's an honor to know you and call you friend right back at you. Thank you.
What a gift Linda Endecott is to the Kansas City community. She's just so hard to nail down in terms of all she's done in her life. And, she still has the energy of, a 30-year-old. Her career spans education, not-for-profits, universities, for-profit companies. I mean, she was in the 80s doing 24/7 call centers for credit counseling, where they were open, then getting calls at 2 a.m. and leading edge on that with a female president, so that was, rare at that time. But her community involvement, her philanthropy, it's just amazing. And unlike any guest, what she experienced, I loved her story. She got a pony at 3 years old, and then what was the actual word? Muck a stable.
Muck a stable. And
Yeah,
yes, I
so
do know what that
basically,
is.
she was shoveling shit at 3 years old.
That's
That's
exactly
what
it
basically said.
is.
Loving it.
And
I
why? Because you got to keep their feet clean.
mean, right. But just the background, she went to college at 17, met the only person in Kansas that went to the same college, which became her husband. And it started as a kindergarten teacher. And I asked her if that was the hardest job she ever had. And she said, yes. But yeah, just so amazing. But, her, and it showed the time that she grew up. I think she might have just turned 75 years old, late December of 2024. And so, she was growing up in the 50s and 60s, and just the gender roles. And, I asked her, did you ever think about going into business? A lot of women became teachers. That was kind of the professional job
That's
of
what
choice.
it was.
Or, an admin assistant, which was called a secretary at the time. And her dad had a phenomenal story of hiring only male secretaries in probably the 60s and 70s, and because he didn't want his wife, Linda's mom, to worry. But anyhow, just fascinating, and I couldn't keep up with all the name dropping, but she knows a lot of people, and she's such a gift to Kansas City. Joe, what you take out of the conversation?
It just went all over the place. She has so many things, and I got a feeling that she didn't tell us every story that she knows.
Oh, of course, no way.
We could have made a lot longer interview out of that if she would have told all of her stories. You talked about the gender roles that she had mentioned, and let me tell you, I remember that. I'm not quite as old as she is, but I grew up in the late 60s, early 70s. And I remember very distinctly the help wanted pages of the local newspaper was split into two sections. There was the help wanted male and help wanted female. And the help wanted male had things like auto repair and executives and, stuff that guys would do. And the help wanted female had secretaries and some retail help and housekeeping and things like that. There was very much in the 60s and into the early 70s even a gender expectation, if you will. There was no occupation that wasn't divided by gender. Every occupation you could put into one category or the other. It was either a male occupation or a female occupation. And that's just the way it was. And that's something that I think that people need to remember. There's this expectation of historical context that you have to keep in mind. That's just the way it was. That doesn't make it right or wrong or anything, and we've certainly come a long way since then. But you have to examine things like that in their historical context. Even when you look at things like slavery in the early 1800s, or if you looked at the way that we treated the Native Americans in 100 years earlier than that, or in the way that we treated Black people during the Civil Rights era in the early 60s and things like that, there was this concept of historical context that you have to keep in mind. And she lived through it. I lived through it to a certain extent. And we will never forget that. And we are molded by that historical context. It was an interesting way to remember that. People that do not study history are doomed to repeat it.
Right.
We have to keep that in mind. We cannot ignore. We can't play like that didn't exist. It did exist, and we have to study that so that we can learn something from it. It was an incredible interview. I loved it.
Yeah. In terms of, you mentioned that, and Mad Men, as you know, is one of my favorite TV series of all time.
I love Mad Men.
It was so good. But some people didn't like it because how they treated women in the workplace, but they were just depicting how women that worked in ad agencies were treated.
That's what it was. And I grew up with that. That's just the way it was.
What advice would you have for our great listening audience today, Joe?
We are going to that great philosopher named Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, today, he had a lot of things to say, but one of the things that he said was, never put off till tomorrow what you can do the day after tomorrow just as well.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.